Welcome to the Q&A webinar for the NIH Director's Transformative Research Award for RFA RM25-003. I want to just first introduce the panelists. It'll be Dr. Patricia Lebowski, who is the program leader for the High Risk, High Reward Research Program. And also, I will be participating in this panel. I'm Becky Miller, another program leader in the Office of the Director. I help manage the High Risk, High Reward Research Program. So before we start, I just want to talk to you a bit about the Common Fund that's housed in the Office of the Director. I mention it because, we create these programs that last anywhere from 5 to 10 years. And within these programs, there may be resources that may be of use to you. So for each of these programs, which span the mission of the NIH, there may be funding opportunities available for you to apply to. There may be access to data that may be useful in your research. There might be methodology, reagents, protocols, even access to high-end instrumentation that might be of use to you in your research program. So I encourage you to go to our website at commonfund.nih.gov and take a look at these different programs and see if there are any that are of interest to you, of relevance to your research program, and see how they might be useful for you. Particularly the data sets are something that you might be able to use in some future funding opportunities. But for today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on one program in the Common Fund in particular, and that is the High Risk, High Reward Research Program. So this program is composed of 4 separate initiatives. It has the NIH Director's Pioneer Award, the New Innovator Award, the Transformative Research Award, and the Early Independence Award. And with these initiatives, the program aims to support scientists at all career stages who propose outstanding, high-risk, high-impact research. We issue annual funding opportunities for these initiatives, and we are looking for high-risk, high-impact ideas. We don't require preliminary data or detailed experimental plans for your applications to these initiatives. And that's because we're asking you to pursue high risk research. And we realize that you may not have the preliminary data, you can't get it funded. This type of project may not fare well in traditional NIH review. And really what we're looking for is looking for a research that has a really high impact potential. We also welcome any topic of relevance to the NIH mission. That could be a topic in behavioral, social science, biomedical, applied, formal science. It can be basic, translational, or clinical. And we also encourage applications from all eligible institutions across the United States. So before we go any further, I'd like to thank the different NIH staff members who are compose our HRHR working group. These are the folks who make this program run. This is a very large and complicated program and requires a lot of effort. And these are the people who help us manage the program and make funding decisions. They're really important and we appreciate all their efforts. And as you may notice on the slides, there are a lot of acronyms behind people's names. And these indicate the different NIH institutes and centers that the people belong to. And we have representatives from every administering NIH institute and center. So we have buy-in across the NIH, and we rely heavily on their input and their work to make this a successful program. So for now, though, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Lebowski to talk more in depth about the Transformative Research Award.
Thanks, Becky. Hi, everybody. I want to thank everyone for coming today and for your interest in the High Risk, High Reward Research Program. And we'll talk about this Transformative Research Award. And as the graphic there shows, we're looking for ideas that are way outside the box, okay? This was designed in 2009, quite a while ago, to support really exceptionally innovative or creative research projects. And these projects must have the potential to either develop new or overturn old paradigms, fundamental paradigms. So again, started in 2009. One of the unique things about this award is that it's open to either an individual or a team at any career stage. So you don't need to have special eligibility stage requirement for your career stage or anything else. And it can be multiple people or it can be individuals. Again, as Becky noted, we don't require any preliminary data. Another thing that's unique here is the budget can be flexible. You need to justify it extremely well, but you don't have to get prior approval required if you have a large budget request. So we do not set the budget, you do, but you need to tell us exactly how much it would cost to do that. These are 5-year awards. We use the R01 mechanism that you're probably familiar with, and this is different. It cannot be renewed. So this is a one-time shot, 5 years to transform that paradigm that you're focused on. So I mentioned we use an R01 mechanism, but we use it in a pretty different way than what you might be used to. You can use a specific aims page. You have to use a specific aims page. But instead of listing, maybe a short background and hypothesis and your aims, we give you specific subheadings and we ask you to not include your aims, but instead what you need to do is distill the project into one page and discuss why this is a transformative research award initiative. You can use the 2 sections there. You want to talk about significance, innovation, potential impact. You want to talk about your insight into this problem and the rationale for the approach. And I'll talk more in the review section about why this one page is so important. The research strategy section is also used, but again, it's not used exactly the same way as what you're used to, perhaps in a standard R01 application. So you don't need substantial preliminary data. You don't need a ton of experimental detail. Instead, what we want you to do is use this space to address these 5 bullets here at the bottom that are of importance to the Transformative Research Award. So you might set the context for the project by talking about, an overview of what's important here. You're going to talk about the approach. Of course, it's important. You don't have to have experimental details, but you have to describe your logic, why you're doing what you're doing. You have to ensure reviewers that you're going to do this with the appropriate rigor and you have a robust plan. That robust plan should include alternatives, perhaps limitations, etc. You're going to talk about innovation. Why is this exceptionally innovative? What's so new and special about this? You're going to tell the reviewers why this is appropriate for a transformative research award. Why is this high risk and high reward? You need to recognize that risk, talk about the risk, also talk about your plans to mitigate it, but acknowledge what is risky here and maybe what's not, but what is risky, and then importantly, what's the reward? We're not all that interested in high risk, low reward. Okay, we want high risk, high reward. And then finally, you want to include a timeline. You might have some critical decision points in there, go, no go steps or something like that, and perhaps a map of your deliverables and when they might be delivered. So what do you want to think about when you're writing up that review strategy? We'll talk about the review more in a moment, but the reviewers are not all going to be subject matter experts. So you need to write this for an audience of people that are really smart scientists, but they're probably well outside your scientific field or the field of the application. And you want to convince them of the innovation and the potential for unusually high impact. So you need to spend some time talking about that and describing that for your reviewers. You do however you want. We often suggest that you begin with a description of the field, maybe some of the boundaries that are currently in place, current state-of-the-art that's being used to approach these boundaries, and give us a context of why your proposal is so innovative and what the potential impact might be. Why is this high reward and high risk? Be careful with jargon. You do not want to have alphabet soup in your application. Remember, there's not subject matter experts, so be careful with how much jargon you use, and you might want to ease the reader slowly into that jargon in your document. So even though we tell you we don't want a detailed experimental plan, they need to understand what you're going to do. So you need to take them through your thought process, make sure that they understand you've thought about this really deeply and really carefully. You have alternative plans. You, again, identify the risk and how are you going to get around that risk? If plan A doesn't work, what's plan B? If plan B doesn't work, what's plan C? And if you have to go with plan C, what do you sacrifice that you're not going to get out of plan C versus plan A? Sorry, too many acronyms. So also, you really want to make sure that the reviewers appreciate that you're going to be robust and rigorous about this. Any new approaches that you develop are going to be validated rigorously. If you're going to use animals or humans, you want to justify your numbers. And don't forget to use sex. Consider sex as a biological variable if you are doing experiments where that's appropriate. So let's talk about the review a little bit. This is different than an R01 review, very different. It is not a regular study section. It is going to be reviewed in a special emphasis panel or SEP. So all the applications will come in, and then an editorial panel of about 15 or 18 scientists will review these documents. I think I go into more detail in a bit, but they're going to select a subset reading only your specific aims page. Now, you still have to include the whole application. It's not like a foundation where you submit just the aims and then are invited to apply. Sorry about that, but the whole thing comes in. So that editorial panel selects a subset of applications that are selected because they really show a lot of transformative potential. That's really the key thing. That's why your specific aims page is so important. Next, that subset is sent out to phase 2 reviewers who are topic experts or subject matter adjacent experts, and they're going to review the whole application, and they're going to provide critiques and scores. Finally, the applications, all of those go back to that initial editorial panel for phase 3, and they're going to review the applications and the comments, and then they're going to select a subset. They're going to draw a line and discuss a certain percentage, and it's a pretty low percentage, somewhere in the teens, and they're going to discuss and score those final discussed applications. Finally, as per all NIH policy, we'll do a second level of review with the OD, Council of Councils, to review the first level of review. So in the next slide, I think I can go into a little more detail here. Again, phase 1 with that editorial panel, yeah, okay, 16 to 20. There are going to be scientists that are going to be the subject area is very broad. So it's not going to be specific to your area of science. So you want to write it for the really smart scientists that maybe doesn't know that much about your area. They're gonna cover, really, think about it, 16 or 20 people that should cover the entire portfolio of all NIH research. So write it for that audience. Each aims page, and only the aims page, is going to be reviewed by 4 of those individuals, and then they bin them based on their potential transformative impact. So then they moved Okay, each person gets 40 or 50, but they move about 50% of them forward to phase two. And this is going to happen, your applications come in beginning of September, and this usually happens September to November. The Center for Scientific Review runs this entire review process, do a great job. And they have to recruit these individuals and manage this part of the review. So it goes September to November this year. So the next ones that they go up to phase two, now the scientific review officer is going to recruit topic experts. So based on those applications that made it through phase one, 70 to 80 of them, they're sent out to topic experts who also have to be recruited. So this happens September, December into February. These mail-in reviewers, MAIL, they they review, they read it closely, they provide written comments. They're focused on the review criteria. Now, these will be reviewed using the traditional now simplified review framework criteria that you can read about in the funding opportunity. I'm not going to go through them today, but they will address significance and transformative impact, innovation, and the logic of your approach to the problem. So phase three, remember, everything goes back to that editorial panel. Each panel member gets quite a few of these, 15 to 20 applications in each pile, and they review them. They have the phase two topic expert reviewers and preliminary scores. So they have those reviews in their hand and they lean into those. They'll select about half of the phase two applications to move forward to discussion. Then they discuss them and score them. And that happens usually sometime in March. So now we're here to answer questions, right, Becky?
Yes. So, what we're going to do now is um, discuss some questions that were submitted for the webinar. And we're going to discuss them in topic areas. And the first topic area that we're going to discuss is eligibility. All right. So, an easy one. What's the definition of high risk? How do we know?
It's one of those things you know it when you smell it, right? So yeah, I think the key is it's high risk, but it's not insane risk, right? It's not, it's more about what it's not. It's not something that's obvious and easy to do, something that anybody could do, or many different, maybe not anybody, but many different laboratories could pursue. It's something that is a little bit risky, maybe more than a little bit, but that you have a plan around. If you don't have a plan, then it's probably too high risk. But I think it's sort of up to you to define high in this scenario. You, the applicant, not you, Becky.
Yes, thanks. I'd be very busy. Um, all right. Is this mechanism designed more for senior level researchers and research teams?
It's open to anyone. We do not use ESI, early stage investigator status. Um, we don't have a special funding line for ESI status. So if you are ESI eligible, you might look at the new innovator instead of this. But we're not specific that we limit it to only senior researchers. I've seen applicants from all over the map, career stage wise.
Right, then a kind of a follow-on question though. Are early stage investigators um, uh, as competitive as more established investigators in this mechanism?
It's hard. I don't want to say no because it depends on the early stage investigator. I think it would be a little more difficult because you haven't had the time to establish your track record the way a more senior scientist might have done. However, if you have a fantastic idea that fits the call for applications, you shouldn't hesitate just because it's your pre-tenure or your early stage investigator. So I don't think that there's a huge disadvantage on either side. It's really more about the project. If you don't think your project has that level of transformative potential, then you shouldn't apply.
Yeah, and we do have the NIH Director's new Innovator Award for
Yes.
those with early stage investigator status who might be considering, other options.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Right. If you already have another HRHR, so high risk, high reward research program grant, does that prevent eligibility for another award?
Oh no, definitely. We're happy to see more ideas from the same investigators. That's fine. There's no advantage or disadvantage to having had one HRHR grant.
All right. If the goal is to change the field, but we don't want to share our work with the field until intellectual property is secured, should we apply?
Well, it depends on how long it will take for that intellectual property to be secured, right? NIH has very clear standards about what needs to be shared and when. It's usually around about the time of publication. So it depends on um, your institution and when or how they secure intellectual property. So I think you might want to talk to them. And if it's something you don't think you could share, maybe it wouldn't be right to get NIH funding for it. These are federal taxpayer dollars and they have to be shared. The results have to be shared.
All right. How important is new technology development for this application?
Well, it depends. It depends on the question that you're asking. If you need to develop new technology in order to push forward your transformative idea. And if that's a critical part of it, then yes, it would be important. However, it might well be that you don't need new technology. You can use existing technology to challenge a paradigm that's out there. Or maybe you're putting together a little bit old, a little bit new, or all old. It doesn't really matter that much. The key is how is this going to transform the scientific field that you're in? Or maybe past your scientific field, right? That's called broader impact.
All right. Can the proposal include examination of ethical and social impacts of the paradigm shifting research project?
Absolutely. Yes. And in fact, for some areas of science, that would be key to changing a paradigm is to make sure that the ethical and social impacts are considered. Yeah.
Right. Can one PI submit two applications to this funding opportunity?
Sure, you can submit four if you want. Yeah, that's absolutely fine to submit more than one. And we can take many more than one from any particular institution as well. There's no limits.
Yep, just make sure that they do not have scientific overlap.
Yes, of course. Sorry.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. All right, would this be a reasonable mechanism for building a clinical research infrastructure if that infrastructure would be transformative to the field?
Mm, that's a tough one because one of the things you would need then would be sustainability of that infrastructure after. Remember, this is non-renewable. This is a 5-year award. So that would be hard. And if that, you would have to really demonstrate how that infrastructure would be transformative to the whole field, not just to your institution. It's not usual that we get infrastructure projects, but we're open to considering them if they're transformative.
Are there specific aspects or criteria we should emphasize in our proposal to ensure it meets the expectations for innovation and transformative potential?
Um, no, I mean, I think that they're not specific. I think what you want to do is you want to talk about innovation. So you have to talk about the current status in the field and potential gaps or challenges, what's needed in that field, and or maybe if there's something that's either incorrect or incomplete, and how your proposal can address that. Um, but I don't think I have specific aspects or criteria. Am I missing something, Becky? Maybe, yeah.
No, I mean
Okay.
it's gonna depend, as you said, on the field and
Yeah,
how to convince reviewers that it is.
absolutely. Convincing reviewers is the most critical aspect of this. Yes.
All right, so multiple PIs are allowed, but are individuals or teams preferred for this mechanism?
We don't have a preference. Either way is fine. One of the things you should think about is whether or not, if you're submitting a single PI application, do you have all the skills? Do you have all the expertise needed to address the problem and answer the questions? And if not, and if you need those collaborations, are those people, is it at the level where they would be a co-investigator or not? And that's up to you. You can include letters of support. So if they're not co-Is, co-investigators, and they're collaborators, that's fine. It's really whatever the science demands. Yeah.
Right, and can non-US citizens apply?
Oh, yeah, sure. You can be a non-US citizen. That's fine. You just must apply from a US institution.
And for a multiple PI grant, do all the PIs need to be based in the US, or can it be a collaboration between a US based institution and an international institution?
Yeah, that's called a subcontract. And what we'll have to do is review and make sure that we're following the appropriate policies for a foreign subcontract at the time of application, and especially if things change at the time when an award is made. But the initial application must come from the USA based institution, not from a foreign institution.
Yeah, and all PIs, if they're listed as a PI, would need to be from a US institution. You can't have a
Yes,
foreign one in
yes, the
there.
PIs, you're right. I'm sorry. The PIs must all be from the US, but you can collaborate. We just have to work out the foreign, yeah,
Yeah,
subcontracts.
yep. Can a PI be from industry?
Sure, as long as your industry, your company is eligible to apply for NIH grants, so you want to be registered, and all those details are in the funding opportunity to how your company needs to be registered, and you should do it now. Don't do it, the week before because it takes a while for those registrations. So make sure that your company is eligible first.
What is meant by transformative research?
Well, the idea of being transformative is you are going to change. You're going to change some paradigm or some dogma in the field. It's going to move things forward in a large way. It won't be an expected, relatively incremental change. It'll be something new, something really sort of radical and important that's going to move the field forward, maybe in a direction where it couldn't go before. It's another thing that's sort of like high risk. It's a little bit hard to define, and it's up to you, frankly, to convince the reviewers that what you're talking about is transformative. So you need to talk about that in your application. Why is what you're proposing transformative? Why is this either technology, this concept? How is that going to change things?
Absolutely. All right. Do junior PIs have a chance at all? It looks rare among past awardees.
No, we've had junior PIs. I think you're right in that many of our PIs are not junior, but frankly, I think because we have the NIH Director's New Innovator um, program that invites and expects, it requires ESI status for early junior PIs. Most people, if you're ESI, you apply to that rather than this. But We have made awards to people that are relatively junior, yes.
What issues should be considered when thinking about an application to the Transformative Research Award?
What issues? Make sure that you are registered and you are eligible to apply, okay? Think about your scientific area. Is it exciting? Is it interesting outside your field? So can you convince someone that's not in your immediate field that this topic is important and exciting? Um, are you trying to either develop a brand new central paradigm or trying to challenge an old one? Um, if it's a technology development approach, would this be a technology that many others would use? Um, why are you doing this? Is the rationale important and compelling? And again, would a smart scientist outside your field be compelled by it? What would change if you get this award, if you complete this project successfully? What would be different? Um, and how different is it? How new is it really? Is it really different from mainstream? Is anybody else doing this? If it's something, that's been done before, but in just a little bit different area, maybe a parallel field, that might not be terribly innovative. So think about how new and novel it really is.
Right. Are applications proposing clinical research appropriate for this award?
Oh, sure. Yes. Now, remember, it is high risk, but we don't want any risk to human subjects. So that's a major limitation. So make sure that you follow the normal clinical risk, human subjects and all of that. So you can't put people at risk. Um, what else? Yeah, it can be a clinical trial. That's totally fine. Um, yeah. If you're going to propose a clinical trial, though, we have a link on our website. I think it's in the funding opportunity as well. You're going to want to talk to whoever would be the NIH institute or center that would be closest to that science to make sure that you're conforming to their policies for clinical research because they're a little different depending on the clinical area that you're researching. So you want to make sure you have that covered as well. So again, start early and think about those aspects and talk to those people. And you can always ask me too.
Right. And is this mechanism suitable for translational research?
Yes, absolutely. Both translational with a clinical emphasis as well as fundamental research. We're open to both. Yes.
Right. And will technology development be allowed or just hypothesis-driven research?
Oh, again, both. We want both. I think if you have one and not the other, if you have only technology development without a biological hypothesis, you might run into problems in review because reviewers will want to know why are you developing this technology? How will it be used? How is it innovative? How is it going to shift a paradigm? So I don't think you would want technology development alone. Um, yeah.
Right. And are early stage investigators, new investigators, or at-risk investigators given priority?
No, they're not given priority. They're all invited to apply. Everyone's invited, but we don't give priority based on those characterizations.
No awards have been made for my area of science. Does that mean my science area is not competitive or of interest to the program?
No, not at all. Really, we welcome everything across the NIH mission, any kind of science. If you email me your specific games page, I promise you I'll respond and I'll probably tell you, yes, this is fine. It's within the NIH mission space. The key is that it's transformative. So just because we don't have awards in that area doesn't mean it's not welcome. we try really hard to make sure we are covering the entire breadth of the NIH mission space. And I promise you that if we don't have a lot of awards in your area of science, it's probably because we haven't gotten any applications in your area of science. If you get to the point where you have a score, one of the things that we do is we try to diversify the program's portfolio when making funding decisions. We really want to cover the breadth of the NIH mission. So if you have an area of science that's not well represented, you actually might be at an advantage as long as you can review well and get a score.
I applied last time and was not funded and received no feedback. Is there any point in applying again with the same
Yeah.
transformative idea?
Right. So the reason you got no feedback is because you were cut after phase one of that review process that I went through earlier. I didn't say that, but if you are cut at stage one, when they review, the editorial panel reviews only your specific aims page, you don't get specific feedback. You get instead, you get a summary of the review process. So it's up to you to decide if your application is truly transformative and if it's worth trying again. You're free to talk to me. You can email me and we can set up a time to have a conversation about it. It often takes a couple times for an application to hit the discussion round in order to really articulate the transformative potential. So I would always say to try again. I mean, if you get reviews that come back, if you get to the second phase and you get a detailed critique that comes back and says, this is not transformative, then you might think about it. Is it truly transformative, or did you just fail to convey the transformative potential? So that's up to you to decide and to share and to, try again. It'll probably come up later, but you are not allowed to resubmit an application, okay? If you submit again, you're submitting a brand new application. So it's never the case that previous reviewers see the reviews and it's an iterative sort of thing. It's really a new shot every time. So that's different than an R1 as well.
Right. Can for-profit small businesses apply, and are they less likely to be awarded than an academic institution?
Oh, they're welcome to apply. Again, as long as you're eligible to apply for NIH grants, yes, absolutely apply. I don't know that they're less likely to be awarded. They really don't apply very often. So, and I don't know all the reasons for that. But if you're eligible, yes, please do apply.
What is the difference between the Pioneer and the Transformative Research Award?
Yeah, that's a good one. A lot of people look at both of those programs and try to sort of decide between them. So Pioneer is for a single PI only. Multi-PI applications are not allowed. You can have collaborators, but it's focused a lot about the single PI. It requires, one of the review criteria, it requires a change in the PI's research direction. So that's kind of a big difference. The focus is on quality and creative potential, track record of the PI, as well as the approach. So it's very strongly PI centric. The PI has to dedicate at least half, 51%, more than half of their research effort in at least the first 3 years of the award. It can taper off after that because, similar to the Transformative Research Award, it's not renewable. There's a fixed budget. It is $700,000 per year for 5 years, and you don't have to have a detailed justification for that. That is what the award is. Now, the Transformative Research Award is different. You can be a single PI, and there's really no advantage or not of one type or another. It could be a single I or a PI or a multi-PI application. The focus might be a little bit more on the project and transformative potential and impact. The PI is still important, We're using the simplified review framework that you've probably heard about, SRF. So again, the project is the really important part. Budgets are flexible, effort level is flexible. It just needs to match the needs of the project. Are there any other differences I left out, Becky?
I think you hit them all.
Okay.
Is it possible to propose the same project for both the Pioneer Award and the Transformative Research Award?
Both at the same time? No, no. You cannot have scientific overlap between two NIH applications that are under review at the same time. In just the discussion of the differences between the two programs, it's remember the Pioneer requires that change in research direction. Transformative does not. So that might be something you want to consider if you're trying to choose between the two. But no, you can have both a Pioneer and a Transformative Research Award application in at the same time, but you can't have the same science. It has to be completely non-overlapping.
All right, and this is another question about the Pioneer and Transformative. Um, so assume you submit applications that are non-duplicative. Um, are there any concerns or considerations with the same PI submitting for both of the awards at the same time?
No, I think you need to, because of the Pioneer restriction on effort, you need to make sure you have that effort available. But you can always adjust if an award is to be made. If by some wonderful chance you got both a Pioneer and the Transformative Research Award, if you score a 10 on both, you might end up getting both. You might have to adjust some of your research effort. But other than that, no, if you can do both, you can do both.
All right, that was the last question for this section. So we're going to move on to now questions about the application and submission process. All right, first question. Is this year's funding opportunity different from last year's, and how?
Yes, it is different. And I don't get to say that every year. So one of the big differences is that for the past few years, we were running a pilot to test the impact of anonymized applications. And we're in the process of evaluating those data. We're not quite done yet, but we are stopping that anonymized requirement. So if you have applied over the last couple of years, it is different. So in the past, the specific aims and research strategy had to be anonymized, and the reviewers did not receive any other parts of the application other than those two portions, which they really did not like very much, I can tell you. They especially did not like that they didn't receive your bibliographies. So rest assured that reviewers read bibliographies. So that's one very important difference. I mean, if you anonymize, I suppose that's fine. That's up to you, but there's no requirement for that anymore. The other change is that we're using the simplified review framework that hopefully you've heard about that CSR has rolled out for all R01s and many other research project grants. So that puts an emphasis on the project as opposed to on the person. The person is still there and is considered, of course, but the main emphasis, score driving emphasis, is on the science, the project that's being proposed. Is that the only difference? I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
All right, another question. 12 pages seems like a lot for little or no preliminary data and little or no experimental plan. So what should be included?
Well, you don't have to make it 12 pages long. If you decide to make it, 10 and a half or 11 pages long, there's nothing wrong with that. However, I know what you're asking. You don't need those details. What you need instead is really to convince the reviewer that this would be transformative and to convince the reviewers that it's really innovative. So I think you should spend some of your time on that, some of your space of the 12 pages, more than what you would spend for a traditional R01. The other thing is that even though you don't need a detailed experimental plan, they still have to understand what you're going to do. And they need to understand that you've thought it through very clearly. So you will want to spend some time outlining maybe go, no go steps, maybe your timeline that goes in at the end, right? So deliverables, there's a lot of things that I don't think you'll have a hard time filling 12 pages, but I think you should use the space with considering the review criteria and what you need to convince those reviewers of for your application.
All right. Can a figure or diagram be included in the specific aims page?
Sure, if it fits the outline of what you need to convey to the editorial panel in that specific aims page, remember that it will be sort of the first level of review for those broad scientists that are not in your topic area. And they're going to be reviewing it for transformative potential. So if a cartoon, a figure, a flowchart, whatever helps you make that point, that's totally fine. Yeah.
All right. We recognize the specific aims page should be used to address the challenge, innovation, impact, and rationale, and not primarily to list specific objectives of the research. However, should the specific aims page include numbered aims, as is typical? We noticed numbered aims in some of the examples provided online.
Well, yeah, it's up to you how you want to organize it. Remember that some of the applications that are online that were the successful TRA applications may have been in response to a funding opportunity that was a little different. However, if you spend the half of that page talking and numbering and breaking out your specific aims and don't convince the editorial panel of the transformative potential, then you've lost that opportunity. So I've often seen sort of abbreviated aims listed there, but not in the traditional R01 sense that they would take up half to maybe 2/3 of the space. So think about who's reviewing it and their review criteria and what you need to convince them of. That's the most important thing. And if you want to include abbreviated aims, that there's nothing wrong with that. You can do it.
All right. Could you say more about the distinction between two sections in the specific aims page, which are the significance and the insight section? They seem pretty similar to me. I would love to hear more about that differences.
Well, I don't I don't know. I haven't thought about that. I mean, significance is how important your project is to this area of science. Insights might be more like specific observations or thoughts you have that could be significant and could add to the significance. So I think that's how I define it. Am I reading that wrong, Becky? Do you see something different there?
Um, no, I would agree. The significance, you're going to convince the reviewers that this is an important area to study, it's an important problem. And I would say like maybe insights to me is kind of like if this is completed successfully, what's going to change? What are some of the insights into the field, that kind of thing.
Maybe
And
I'm not sure how they're defining insights.
yeah, I'm not
You can
not
email me and ask me for more specifics on that question.
there you go. All right. Are we required to strictly follow the proposed structure of the research strategy, or can we add additional sections or put them in different order?
Well, I mean, there's no grant police that are going to come out to your office and be upset if you do them out of order. However, remember that you have a reviewer that has, I don't know how many in front of them, that will be used to a certain order and will be looking for specifics because they're told use these headings, look for these headings, and they're using that information to evaluate the project. So, it's really up to you. It's your grant. But if you decide not to follow the format that's requested, reviewers they might have a problem with that.
All right. We noted in the application materials that letters of reference are not accepted. Are these the same as letters of support from potential collaborators?
Hmm. Yeah, those are different, right? A letter of reference speaks to the PI, and we use those, especially for the Pioneer Award and the Early Independence Award. We require those for those applications. And in fact, we don't allow letters of support for several of our other programs. This program, the Transformative Research Award, you can have letters of support, but not letters of reference. We don't need anybody telling us attributes of the PIs. Letters of support would be similar to what you would use in any R01 if you have a collaborator that is supplying a technology or a reagent or I don't know, a tool or maybe doing something on the project. Like, I don't know, they're operating the mass spec lab at your institution and you need that. So they would write about that. So yes, include the letters of support from your collaborators if they're appropriate.
Right. Are there specific aspects or criteria we should emphasize in our proposal to ensure it meets the expectations for innovation and transformative potential in this specific aims page?
Well, yeah, you should talk about the transformative potential and the levels of innovation. I mean, we don't have metrics around those. I think it's up to you to define where the field is and how your potential, your project that you develop, how that would impact the field and what's going to change if you get the award and do the project and are successful. So that's up to you to define those things.
Right. The human subject section asks for a very high level of detail
Mm.
about planned experiments, which goes against the idea that the studies do not have to be fully proposed or planned out. How
Right.
much detail should we include for each, especially given the goal of flexibility with this award?
Yeah, I think that's very important. You're right, we don't ask for detailed experimental plans, but when it comes to the risk that could occur to human subjects, we can't be flexible, right? We cannot put their health at risk. So that's why you really do need that information in the human subjects section. So I would fill that out. I would complete it in the same way that you would for any other R01. If there's something, if you get the award and if things change and if you end up changing, we're happy to be flexible. You might have to um, amend that section if necessary. But at this point, the reviewers just need to know that you've thought about it very clearly and that you will be protecting those human subjects, that no one's going to be at that kind of risk because of your proposal.
Excellent. Okay. What is the success rate?
Yeah, the success rate, it's not as good as I would like it to be, and it's highly dependent on both how many applications we get and how the funds that we have available to make awards. Over the past maybe 7 to 10 years, it's probably in the area of 5 or 6% success rate. Again, I can't promise that it'll be the same every year. It also depends on how much the budgets are, since we have flexibility with our budgets.
Are these funded by one of the NIH institutes?
Mm.
Is it a strength to make it particularly applicable to one institute, or is it more responsive to make it applicable to many institutes?
Yeah, these are funded by the NIH Office of the Director, which is one of the institutes, but it's probably not what you meant by that question. So at this point, all the set aside funds that you see listed in the call for applications are from the Office of the Director. At sometimes, depending on the year and budgets, and yes, the scientific area in the proposal, an institute or center might come in and fund an application or fund part of an application. Um, I've never seen it be useful to focus your project toward one institute or too many. I think you need to keep the focus on the transformative potential, not on a narrower sort of mission area. I would keep it to what the transformative potential is going to be. Not don't try to focus it down or limit it to something that doesn't make sense.
All right. Does the multi-PI application require a PDPI leadership plan?
Yes, exactly. The same as any multi-PI application R01. You need that plan in there. Yes.
Preliminary data are not required, but are they allowed?
Sure, you can put them in. If you put them in, just know that they will be evaluated by the reviewers. Yes.
Do applications fare better if they include preliminary data?
That's a hard one to answer because I don't know that we've ever looked at that systematically. I think that the use of preliminary data should be very strategic. So you don't want this to look like a standard R01 that would be, important and innovative, but sort of a more iterative project. If it starts to look like that, I guarantee the reviewers will tell you it should be a regular R01. So it's certainly allowed, but I don't think they fare better. I would think they would fare worse if you load it full of preliminary data. If you're going to use it strategically, there might be some sort of a technical barrier that you have a unique ability with some of the technology that you built in your lab to surmount, or if you have a unique idea that's never been tried before and you're putting a couple tried and true technologies together, you might want to show them that you have the technologies in the lab and that you can get them to work. It's really up to you of how much you want to put in there. And as I said, it has to be strategic.
All right. On the fine line between no experimental plan and details about samples for human subjects research, do you want to see a justification for sample size? If so, a narrative justification or a biostatistical justification?
Yeah, you absolutely want to justify your sample size, not only for human subjects, but also vertebrate animals if you're using them. Um, it's up to you what fits your project better, whether it's narrative or if it's biostatistical. You don't have to include the entire power analysis. You could always refer to it, but I think that it should be robust. How you've decided that that's the number of people or mice or whatever animals you're using, how many you're going to use.
Right. I couldn't find the page limits for the Transformative Research Award proposal. What are the page limits?
So there's a link in the funding opportunity that goes to a table for NIH that lists all the page limits for every mechanism that exists. Okay, so you click on that link and you page down to R01 and it will have it there. Briefly, it's one page for specific games, it's 12 for the research strategy, and I don't remember the page limits on the other sections, but they're there, and you should look at that. Again, it's embedded in under application details in the funding opportunity. It's also linked to on our website. We have a lot of information on our website under the application guide, so you can look there as well.
All right, we're going to move on now to questions about budget. Is there any advice regarding applications using multiple institutes with multiple overheads?
Advice? No, I mean, the most important advice is you should request the appropriate amount of money for the research that you want to conduct. This is not a place to pad your budget. You got to justify it all. The PI should be the contact PI from which the institution that would be the primary institution. It should make sense scientifically. You shouldn't. This is not something that you should kind of I don't know, roll the dice with or anything like that. The lead PI, who's the conceptual or perhaps technical or whatever leader of the project, should be the lead institution. Yeah, does that make sense? I don't quite understand. Maybe I'm not understanding the question. Is that what you think what they meant?
I assume so. Yeah.
Okay.
If there is no detailed experimental plan, how detailed should the budget be?
The budget should be detailed. So we want a very clear justification for personnel, supplies, animals, equipment, however you decide that the money needs to be spent for the project. So yes, keep that very justified, very detailed. If there's an award to be made, I guarantee you, especially if it's a large budget, that the program officer will work with you closely. We try not to cut budgets. We try to trust you, but if there's fluff in it, then it will be cut.
How much can I ask for?
Well, I think we say that we have approximately $8 million for the entire initiative. And I guess in theory, your one project could ask for $8 million a year. This is per year for the entire award. But you really, if you're going to do something like that, it'd have to be spectacularly justified. That includes the indirect costs, so think about that. Um, and I can tell you that if you have an enormous budget, we would need a very compelling reason to select that project over multiple other ones. So ask what you need for, what the science really costs.
All right. Are foreign components allowed?
This this policy has been changing recently. So at this point, I would say that if you need um, the foreign collaborator or however you're doing it, you might include it, but I would say that we will have to go with whatever policy is in place and documentation that's in place if an award is to be made. We need foreign U.S. State Department clearance for any foreign projects or subcontracts. It's not trivial, so make sure that it's something that's really needed. Did I leave out anything on that, Becky?
Um, no, I mean, if foreign components, we typically allow them, but if there's money involved, then yeah, we'll have to follow NIH policy
Mhm.
regarding that. But that policy does exclude if you're paying a foreign vendor, like you're purchasing something from a vendor that just
Right.
happens to be
That's
that's
okay.
and consultation as well. So
Yes, that's okay.
yep, yep. As the award recognizes some of the specific research strategies may change as discovery occurs, how do you budget for changes in direction?
Yeah, well, we're not going to have a ton of budget flexibility after an award is made. We could always discuss it if something comes up with supplements or so on, but I would ask you to try to do your best to predict what you're going to need when you make the application. But you can always work with the program officer and with me if an award's made, and we can talk about it at that point. No promises.
How much time effort are recipients expected to devote to their project?
Yeah, so the award recipients, the PIs, you should plan to devote whatever time it would need to complete the project, okay? So the reviewers are going to judge this. So if this is a large project and you were the main PI and you don't have much research effort on it, reviewers are not going to be they will not look at that positively. So just make sure that it makes sense. You have to have the um, the ability to devote that much time. You have to have that within your own portfolio, but at the same time, it must make sense with what the project really needs. If it's too small, that would be bad. If it's too big, it might not balance too well with your budget. So just the right amount. Hopefully your grants office can help with questions like that at your institution.
All right, we are going to move on to the last section, which is on review. Uh, will you inform applicants if their application does not proceed to phase 2 or phase 3?
Mm. So, Becky and I are program staff, and we don't really have anything to do with the review. We watch it happen. Our colleagues, or excellent colleagues at the Center for Scientific Review, are the ones who inform applicants along the way or not. And again, those are policies that are held by the Center for Scientific Review and can change. So, I'm not sure if they do. I think that they might notify you if you make it to phase 3, but I'm not sure that they notify you if you make it to phase 2. I don't recall. And that could change. So, no, we don't inform applicants at any stage.
All right. What proportion of grants make it through the different phases?
Yeah, so it varies from year to year and it depends how many application we get. Approximately 50% make it through phase 1 where the aims are reviewed, right? And so about half of the incoming applications go out to the topic reviewers. And then after those come back and go into phase 3, about half of those, plus or minus, make it through that stage and end up being discussed. So approximately half and then half again. Again, it really depends on how many applications we get.
Will we receive reviewer comments or feedback at the end of the review process?
So yes and no. If you do not progress to phase 2, you don't get a detailed critique. Instead, you get a description of the review process with the judgment that your application was not deemed sufficiently transformative to progress. Um, but if you progress through stage 2 and of course 3, then yes, you get a lot of detailed critiques and a score if you get all the way through phase 3. If you're cut before phase 3, you don't get any scores.
All right. How many applications are rescued for review?
Oh boy, that really depends on the year. I don't know the answer to that, but my guess is that it would be a small number, probably in the single digits, but I don't really know.
Yeah, and just to clarify what we mean by rescue is the editorial panel has the option at any of the phases to select applications that they are really enthusiastic about that may not have scores that would have made it into that allowed them to be in that top 50%.
Right.
Let's see. May I request to exclude a specific reviewer with whom I have a conflict of interest?
You can request that. It's in the PHS assignment form that is required with your application. You can list people that should not review your application, perhaps because they're collaborators. You can also list a person that you perhaps have a conflict with. NIH will consider that. They are not obligated to respect that. And again, that is up to the Center for Scientific Review.
What is the primary focus of the reviewers?
It depends on the stage of the review, right? But top of the chart here is the transformative potential. No matter what, that's what we're most interested in seeing is that there is transformative potential to your project. They're still going to look at all the other elements in the simplified review framework, but that really is the primary criteria.
Is it okay to contact previous reviewers to review my grant application prior to submission?
I would not do that. I don't think that's appropriate. Individuals volunteer their time to be reviewers, but not to review random submissions from people they don't know. I think it's really important that you have people outside your field read your application before you submit it. Remember, you're going to have people outside your field reading and judging that specific Ames page as a first cut. So I would look around your own research institution or other colleagues and friends that would be willing to read for you. But I don't think it's appropriate to contact previous reviewers, no.
Will awards be selected based on scores or at the discretion of the program director?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way we develop a funding plan is we go in score order for the first 70% of our budget. Depends on how much money we have that year, right? And it depends for the transformative research award, it depends on the submitted budgets of the application. So we go in score order, we use up 70% of the funds, and after that, we we look at programmatic priority criteria that are spelled out in the funding opportunity to which you're considering applying. That includes things like the transformative potential. It includes geographic spread across the nation. I'm blanking on all the criteria at the moment, but it's spelled out in section 5 of the funding opportunity. You can look at it right there and know what they are. So we use that to determine the last 30% of the budget. And it's not just up to one program director like myself or Becky. We have that very large working group that Becky showed earlier in the webinar. And we have a subset of individuals there, 3 each, review every single application that receives a score for those programmatic priorities and make sure that it's fair that way. Yeah.
Yeah, like another priority would be, looking at how cross-cutting it is, as well as
Yes. Thank you.
to help diversify the Transformative Research Award portfolio. So we're always looking
Yes.
to fund new science areas that have not previously been supported.
Yeah, and that's really important when people were asking earlier about their area of science not being represented in the portfolio. That's one of the ways we do try to broaden the portfolio. It's very important to us.
Absolutely. So that was the last question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I want to thank everyone for watching. A recording of this webinar and the slides will be posted on our website at commonfund.nih.gov/TRA. But if you have any additional questions, please feel free to email us at transformative_awards@mail.nih.gov, and we can help answer any other questions you have. So
Yes,
thank you
please
for your
reach
time.
out. Please reach out. We really do want to help. And thank you. We're looking forward to your applications.
All right.